I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a great day and a great start to April. You know, we cannot do this live show without you, our viewers and our listeners who participate on live shows, who watch our playbacks, who support us by submitting really great questions to our guests. And perhaps most important of all, helping us figure out what modern work is all about. And to you, I say thank you. This show, this community is really built on you. It's built on your support. So if you are new to What's Your Work Fit, welcome. Please engage with us on the platform of your choice. We live show stream on LinkedIn. We're also on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. Next up, we have a Substack presence at dansmolin.substack.com. This is becoming a truly wonderful companion to the live show where you can watch clips of past episodes. You can also go to a link of live and recorded shows. You can listen to our audio podcast here, and you can also read up on our written content. So again, you can find us at dansmolin.substack.com, and please sign up. We're keeping it free for the next few months to really stoke as much new subscribership as possible. And it's a lot of fun, and I hope you can join us there. And one last ask that I have of all of you, and that is this. If you enjoy the discussions and the content here on What's Your Work Fit, I ask you to reach out to 5 friends who you think could benefit and ask them to subscribe directly to What's Your Work Fit on the platforms of their choice. That's it for the self-promotion. I'm going to get to our guest right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Vivek Pandit. Hey, Vivek, how are you today?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Well, we appreciate you, sir. Tell you a little bit about Vivek. He is co-founder and COO of PeduL. We're going to ask him about that in a minute. He is also on the Forbes 30 under 30 list. That's a nice list to be on. Vivek's a TEDx speaker and author, a proud Gen Zer, and like me, he's a founding member of the Future of Work Alliance. You got a lot on your plate, my friend.
Yes, I do. But you know what? Love it all, and it brings joy to my life. So it's all good.
Well, that's interesting. Very good. Before we get into our question that we have teed up for the live show today, I'm hoping that you could give us a quick summary of PeduL. What is it, and what is its value?
Yeah. So recruiting is corporate America's most expensive problem. And with Gen Z entering the workforce, I think in the next couple of years, we're about to be a little over a third of the workforce. Corporate America is really struggling to connect with us, to reach us, to target quality talent, but diverse talent. And when I graduated college, it was extremely difficult to find a job. And I went to Brown University. I had the accolades. I had, whatever. And I realized if this was a problem that I was facing, I couldn't believe what everyone else must be going through around the country and honestly around the world. So what we did is we figured out what is the core issue of why recruiting seems like a big game of hide and seek, right? Like employers can't find us, we can't find them. But the irony is no one's trying to hide. So if no one's trying to hide, you must be seeking in the wrong place. So what we discovered was everything in the recruiting world is about trying to have Gen Z go to corporate America, whether it's at a career fair, at Handshake, Indeed, LinkedIn. But no one had gone to corporate America and said, actually, let's go to where Gen Z lives, which is social media, right? I don't visit social media. That's where I live. And so we're the first people to bring the idea of social media, digital ads, influencer marketing, to talent acquisition. So companies from a marketing perspective have used social media as a way to reach consumers. But HR and talent acquisition had never used social media as a means to reach candidates. So we brought the two paradigms of like Gen Z social media and HR and recruiting, and are building the infrastructure to connect employers and career opportunities to Gen Z candidates that are scrolling on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, things like that.
So now that we all know what PeduL's about, I'm going to ask you the lead question for today, which is this: how do I become an employer of choice for a generation? In this particular case, Gen Z. So take us through how your customers and perhaps even your prospects engage with you to figure out, how do I make this the place that great Gen Z talent will think of when they think about where to launch a career or to extend a career?
Yeah, great question. So there's actually, it's two-pronged approach answer in terms of you have to actually be a company that Gen Z would love to work at, right? And that's a whole different realm that we can also absolutely get into in terms of like what communication structure should you have in place, what type of career mobility, what type of values should you be emulating inside your company, things like that. But the other part of that, which is where we really are dominating, is how do you actually communicate any of that to Gen Z, right? Because the first step to being the employer of choice for a generation is Gen Z knowing you're even an employer or a good employer to work for, right? So a lot of our companies that we work with, a lot of the large Fortune 500 companies, big in consumer packaged goods, CPG, everyone knows them, like L'Oreal or Estee Lauder. Everyone knows them for their products, but nobody thinks of them, especially certain demographics like men, that's a great place for me to work, right? A lot of top talent is going to your consulting, your financing, your top tech giants, things like that. But nobody's actually considering like, oh my God, I could go work at a L'Oreal. I could go work at an Estee Lauder. I could go work at Unilever. So the first step to becoming an employer of choice is we have to know who you are, because we can't apply to something we don't know exists. So that's the first thing that we'll do is we'll allow them to get their employer value proposition or their careers out to millions of Gen Z via social media and viral content and things like that. So that's the first thing. We got to know who you are. The second thing is, and this is, this phrase or word is used all the time, but it's important, is authenticity, right? So companies are learning to become authentic, I guess you could say. But that's not their bread and butter, right? A lot of their lingo, a lot of their interviews are very corporate-y. You very rarely see a CEO or a hiring manager talk in more of a casual sense. It's always like suit and tie, like corporate lingo, very careful with what they say. Gen Z is used to like iPhone style videos, wearing whatever and just speaking whatever comes to their head. So we're teaching corporate America, how to have that authentic voice and really humanize them. But we're doing that by connecting them to people that have mastered authenticity, which are influencers, which are content creators. So that's the second thing is, okay, how can we bring a more authentic voice to who you are so Gen Z can actually resonate with who you are? And the other thing that's tied to authenticity is trust. So Gen Z historically distrusts three major things: government, media, and large corporations. So if you're a large corporation trying to hire and you're telling me why you're awesome and why I should trust you, you're not even fighting from a place of neutral. Like, I'm not even neutral. I already distrust you just because you're a large corporation, and anything that comes out of your mouth, I have like this like skeptical attitude for. However, who I do trust are my favorite influencers, the people that I follow on social media. If they tell me something and they speak with an authentic voice, and I'm following them because I trust them, and they're exposing me to an opportunity I never would have thought about applying to, that's how we start to make these companies that, again, people don't think about as applying to as an employer of choice for Gen Z. And so that talks about, what highlighting the things internally, like the first prong that I said of what makes them great, but really mastering the communication style, partnering with influencers, and using content as the language to communicate to Gen Z instead of like corporate lingo or very lengthy, wordy job descriptions.
I'm laughing inside.
Yeah.
Why? And you know this. I spent 20 years of my life as
Yep.
a headhunter, 13 of which running my own company. And how I made my money, how I filled the spec was basically what I would call push. I would push out a narrative and a job spec based on what my client says that they needed or wanted.
Yep.
And it was really up to me to go to central casting, if you will, which is a term that I think most Gen Z don't understand. It's how 100 years ago, movie musicals would find talent to fill the roles in the movie. Go to central casting, find me somebody who looks like XYZ. And that worked quite well. It worked throughout my 20-year run. But the wheels started falling off that proposition, I would say, Vivek, around the time of the 2009 Great Recession, when suddenly it became more difficult for hiring managers to find people that they wanted, and perhaps more importantly, to retain the ones that they hired. And we'll get into retention in a bit. But I bring up all this because I used to work with hiring managers, but also HR heads. And Lori, hi, Lori, she says she's an HR lead, and she asks, how would this approach to recruitment change the work that I, as an HR person, do? And can it make it better? What do you think?
I think that's a great question, because we get that question a lot, which is, are you replacing my recruiters? And obviously we want to make things more efficient, but we don't necessarily want to replace. So yes, the way that we think that this can make it better. So imagine all the jobs or recruiting efforts that HR leads when it comes to going to university campuses, when it comes to posting on different job boards, when it comes to talking to people that have networked their way in, things like that, right? Like everything that you do to try to attract talent. What we're saying is, we're going to take those efforts, instead of you flying to a dozen universities or going, posting on a dozen different job boards. We're going to use that same person. We're just going to redirect your efforts into like managing and working with influencers.
Yeah.
So we're just optimizing where you're seeking, where you're searching, right? Because you're fishing in the wrong pond. Someone still needs to do the fishing, though, if that makes sense. So basically what we're saying is, we're building the infrastructure for you to connect and work with influencers as your new headhunters, and using their social media pages, their following, as the new university or the new job board. So it makes it more effective, and it makes it more optimal for you actually to do your work. And frankly, you'll see a better ROI with the candidates that you're attracting. Because think about it like this. I forgot the stat that we put out, but it's basically like, if you combine all the Ivy Leagues, the Big 10, the Big 12, blah, 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 you get X amount of millions of students, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go to 3 or 4 influencers that have the exact same reach. And a lot of these people at the Ivies or the HBCUs or HSIs are following the same influencers. So we're just making your efforts more optimal and effective, and telling you that instead of connecting with all of these universities and job boards, why don't we redirect your efforts to working with influencers and getting your message out to them? And so from that perspective, no, we're not replacing. We're just making things more effective and kind of redirecting your efforts into a new pond.
And yet, I know there's a lot of hiring managers still out there who were like, oh, come on. Come on. This is the old ways always worked for me. I don't need this crazy cockamamie novel approach. And yet, Vivek, um, our previous guest, Billy Howard, the CEO of Brand Through, has built a business based on measuring the emotional impacts, negative and positive, of brands.
Mm.
And she figured out 2, 3 years ago, this has some application for hiring Gen Z talent. So it's been proven out.
Yeah.
So I want to get to Esther's question. What has to be in place for Gen Zers to positively engage with a company? And we've talked about social media and influencers, but is there more than that? My daughter's 24, so she's in your cohort, a little younger.
Cool. Yeah.
How, and she's going to be entering healthcare as a nurse, hopefully next year. And
Okay.
as she looks at healthcare brands to consider, I don't know that influencers alone are going to be enough to entice her to one particular healthcare brand versus another. Knowing my daughter, she's going to be wanting to hit all the assets: blogs, vlogs,
Yep.
podcasts, live shows like this one, websites. How do you go about that if you're a Gen Zer and you want to, you like what you're hearing, but you're not quite there yet? You want to kick the tires.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to answer the second part because that's quicker, and then we'll go to
Okay.
the first part. So why social media is a place to do it? To put it in simple terms, that is just where we live. My home is social media.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm scrolling at 2 a.m. on TikTok, I am just as qualified as a candidate than if I wear a suit and tie and show up at a career fair. So we're actually allowing companies to reach candidates first before they even go to the career fair.
Right.
They might just not look the job or look like they're ready to apply for a job, but they're the same person, right? So social media for us is the paradigm of stop trying to help Gen Z find a job. Let's make jobs find Gen Z. Just like everything else, like so many products on my table right here, my desk, I bought because it targeted me as a digital ad. And so when you do the same thing with a job, you're meeting candidates where they are. We're not asking Gen Z to come to corporate America's doorstep. We're going to Gen Z's doorstep, which is social media. That's where everybody lives. So that's the question to that. Now, in terms of, okay, an influencer is not enough to attract me or convince me to work somewhere. That is a great point. And what we're saying is it's the first step to at least make you aware of something, right? Because again, a lot of these companies people don't even think about working there. So I'm not going to do research on you online if I don't even know that I should be doing research on you, if that makes sense. So we're using influencers as a mechanism for career discovery, which in America, career discovery does not happen organically.
No.
It's something which is very interesting. If you watch a Gen Zer wake up, live a day, and go to sleep, they are exposed to songs, products, logos, news, things going on halfway across the country or world. Not one new job did they learn about, right? Organically or naturally. So that's what we're, really trying to hammer down is like, okay, let's make career discovery as organic as everything else in our culture. After you discover something, we tell companies all the time, you got to watch what's being said about you on social media, on Reddit, on various forums. Gen Z goes on some deep internet wormholes to really figure out, can I trust this company? What's it like? We'll reach out to a lot of people that used to work there or currently work there. Gen Z does a great job of doing their research to figure out, okay, using the internet, is this a place that like I actually would, connect to, vibe and culture fit? So we really care about culture fit. Companies are starting to really understand the importance of culture fit, but Gen Z has really led the charge of like, no, I'm culture fitting you, and companies are learning they got to do that back. But the two things that are really important, I think, well, there's a couple, but the two I want to nail down.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times with millennials, we've talked about career stability, financial security. And I think the misnomer with Gen Z is like we care about social impact to a large degree, which I think is true.
Yeah.
But based off of 08, what we saw with our parents, based off COVID, the current economy, Gen Z really, really craves financial security. in job security. So yes, we might want to like consider working at 5 or 10 jobs in our 20s. But financial security and proof that like there will be career mobility, upward mobility, is really, really important to us. So that's not something that social impact is not necessarily trumping that anymore, like I think we used to think. The other thing is companies are getting confused between immediate gratification
Yeah.
and thinking that means entitlement, right? So what I tell companies is immediate gratification, that is definitely a character trait of Gen Z, does not mean immediate agreement or entitlement. It simply means immediate feedback. Because I live in a world where if I have an idea, and it could be a bad idea, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but I live in a world where if I have an idea, I can put it on Twitter, I can make a video, it can go viral, and I can get thousands of people giving me feedback on what I just said, right? So when we go to a company and we have an idea, the desire for us to want to communicate that idea is not necessarily because we're entitled and we think everyone should listen to us. It's because we just view it as efficient. I have an idea. What are the communication structures internally to where I can get this idea out? And if people disagree, that's fine, but let's talk about it, get feedback, and iterate or move or take an action. So companies that have put in place communication structures for Gen Z to propagate ideas and potentially act on them versus an idea going through 10 bureaucratic hoops, we've seen have done a great job attracting Gen Z because it communicates to Gen Z that you're not going to follow a bureaucratic structure all the time. If you come in and you have an idea, you can actually act on it and make a difference. So I think that's the other thing that Gen Z is really craving, along with stability, is the ability to actually affect change with their voice and actions.
You started our discussion mentioning the one thing that was ever present in my mind in those 20 years as a recruitment specialist, and that was the delicate balance between cost and investment.
Mm.
If a client doesn't understand what you're trying to do, they'll go to the last page of your proposal and see how much it costs and roll their eyes.
Yeah.
If you give them something that makes them hopeful, at least they're starting to be on board about the investment value of the work that PeduL does and the value that it provides. One of the things that I have seen from my own purview that's really caught fire is this notion of talent lifetime value.
Mm.
A recruitment company client, if they're worth their salt, are going to think well past the cost of recruiting and onboarding that new person to, if we've done our job right, we're going to have them for the long term. And if we do that, we satisfy one of the itchy points that many Gen Z are concerned about, and that is economic stability, job stability. I know that Gen Z have gotten a lot of notoriety lately for short tenures, but I don't think that's their fault. I think that's the fault of an old system
Yep.
that hasn't figured out their true value, their secret sauce, and perhaps re-engineered the workplace to get the best out of them. So I'm wondering if you could talk, Vivek, about this notion of lifetime value, which goes beyond ROI. What it basically means is, yeah, I'm thinking about the return on that investment, but the lifetime value thinks about the contributions that that person could make 6 months out, 9 months out, 12 months out, 2 years out, 5 years out, maybe even 10 or more. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, which is it's not like Gen Z wants to keep applying to new jobs and have 10 careers in 10 years, right?
Mhm.
Which is we're kind of being forced into it a little bit. I mean, not entirely. There's nuance to that conversation, but I think it goes back to what I was saying about Gen Z really, along with stability, there's this idea that like we want to change the world, which is true.
Which is
But
true.
let's shrink it down a little bit. Let's just call it change. We want to affect change, and that can be something little, right? So one of the things that there was a survey, I forgot who did it, but it came out and it was astounding how many Gen Zers were like, I just wish my hiring manager or my manager or whatever would talk to me more one-on-one. right?
Mm.
Like, I just wish I got more feedback. I just wish I knew the impact I was having. And when you dig a little bit deeper, what you'll see is oftentimes when a manager gives feedback to their Gen Zer or to an employee, they're conveying the feedback that contributes to the bottom line of the company. So let's use sales for example.
Mhm.
A manager will come up to their Gen Z salesperson, say, "Great job, you closed X amount of deals, you got this many people on, your conversion was this. Here's your cut. Great job, you're here to stay. We might promote you." Right? That's the statistics that the manager and their manager might care about, which is also important to the Gen Zer. But how did that Gen Zer actually make a difference in those people's lives or the deals that they closed? Right. So instead of, hey, you closed 5 deals, you just helped 5 new people integrate something into their startup so now they can affect. You need to make it more tangible, and you need to make it more impact oriented. So the Gen Zer doesn't see statistics all the time, but they see the action or change behind the statistic. I think that's really important. So if you put communication standards in where like your Gen Zer doesn't feel ignored, you allow the Gen Zer to see the change behind the statistic, and you're allowing the Gen Zers to communicate ideas effectively and quickly, even if it's a bad idea, and you can tell them it's a bad idea, but just get feedback on it.
Mhm.
These are ways that Gen Zers are finding purpose in their work, because at the end of the day, that's really what they want. And frankly, with the creator economy and with the ability of AI and different tools for Gen Zers to monetize things so quickly, if they don't find purpose in their work from the 9 to 5 job, they will leave. And it might be another job. It might just be their own thing, because now Gen Zers are figuring out how to make money in all sorts of ways that don't require a 9 to 5 job. So I think those are the key things when it comes to like retaining someone for the long term. Yeah.
So I made a lot of money placing salespeople in my
Yeah.
recruitment
Yeah.
career. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the old paradigm was that you had two types of revenue generators. You had what we would call the hunter gatherer,
Okay.
the hunter salesperson, who they're all about money and recognition. And often are looked at and revered as somewhat monolithic creatures that are able to blow out a sales bogey. I know I'm talking jargon here, but the idea is the hunter gatherer, the sales hunter, typically worked at converting a prospect to sale. And so they were with that prospect through all the courting and all the presentations and all the back and forth, and then finally the sale. And they are remunerated based on that first big sale and perhaps a percentage, if you will, on what follows. The other part of that paradigm is more business development, and the pejorative term would be farmers. They tended the crops, they kept that new business growing. And oftentimes, a sales manager or a hiring manager in a selling company, perhaps a startup, perhaps an early stage company, that has to drive revenue, that has to bring in new prospects and convert them to sale, that's what that hire will do. That's all they'll do. It's kind of cold and deliberate. It doesn't get into the mission driven stuff that perhaps many Gen Z are motivated by. I bring this up, Vivek, because it's not just about sale. There's a lot of positions that Gen Z are offered now that are relics of an old past. And those Gen X senior managers are the ones who work them and crush them and did really well in them, and perhaps don't understand why that new hire isn't singularly focused on that revenue generation and not the stuff that perhaps makes the work they do fit, the societal benefits of working with that client, or how they treat their clients and their fellow hires, etc. So, is this something that you run up? When I mean you, I mean PeduL runs up against with hiring managers who use your platform, get really good, talented people, and discover in the end, yeah, they're doing okay, but they're not quite the chemistry we're looking for? And I have a second part of that question.
Yeah. So, we've been around for a little bit, but in terms of like comparing it to a true company that's been around for decades, we're pretty early, right?
Mhm.
So, we're still very close with our clients. We vet them pretty properly. They know kind of what our value proposition is in terms of attraction, engagement. Um, See, I guess what I'm trying to say is you have the whole funnel of recruiting from attracting
Mhm.
to hiring to retaining, right? The entire funnel is broken. And actually, what was really tough for us was like, what part of the funnel are we trying to fix? Because there's a million problems in recruiting. Um, but what we realized was if you can dominate the new top of funnel, you have the ability to recreate the rest of the funnel, right? So that's where our focus is at the top of funnel right now. So all that to say, TLDR is like when I tell a company, uh, here's some insights or workshops on how you can retain talent. But
Mhm.
for right now, that's not my bread and butter. That's on you. So here are things that you can do. Here are things that like we can give you insights on. But I'm not necessarily, first of all, I haven't been around long enough. Secondly, it's not necessarily my priority right now
Right.
to measure the retention value and make that my like bread and butter, if that makes sense from a product perspective. Yeah. So,
The second part of the question I was going to ask you has to do with really the value that you are providing
yeah.
as a coalescer of social media and influencer benefit. You are creating a very large tribe of prospects for a company to consider.
Yeah.
I think, and this sort of goes along with an insight I first gathered along the time of that Great Recession, where I suddenly started to see companies, nonprofits in particular, flip the script on engaging hiring prospects. So the old script, which I made a lot of money on, paid a few tuitions for my daughter and bought a
Yeah.
few cars and paid the mortgage, was that here's the job, form fit, or shape shift a candidate to fit it.
Yeah.
I was very good at that,
Yeah.
but I wasn't dealing with Gen Z and I wasn't really dealing with millennials. I was dealing with late Gen Xers who were built to do that. But starting in 2009, 2010, 2011 in particular, around the DC area where I live, I started to see NGOs, non governmental organizations, flip the script on engaging employee prospects, which is this: they would create a relationship somehow with people who found them on the web, or perhaps in a rudimentary way, somehow on social media, maybe on a listserv or on a blog. And they would engage those prospects in a conversation. And if they liked what they heard, and perhaps even too, if the candidate prospect liked what they heard about the brand, they would gather for coffee and they would just get to know each other.
Yeah.
And they would do the fit check up front to see, can we work with this person? Do we like them? Excuse me. Do we see a future in working with them? And do they see a future in working with us? So the start of that happened around the Great Recession of 2009 and the years after that. I see that now as the working model, if you will, for engaging with Gen Z and everyone who comes after, which is, I think, what you are trying to support. So my question is, it's one of fit check. It's one of engaging people with some veracity, that you are an authentic brand, and hopefully we're trustworthy. I think that's what happened in that old paradigm that I shared with you from the nonprofit days. Is that what is happening? And what happens if for some reason, when a person starts investigating there on after, they find something that they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to call you on it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting uh point, and I appreciate you sharing like kind
Oh,
of
sure.
that. So yeah, our whole thing is, like I said this in the beginning, was humanize corporate America,
Hmm.
right? Like you got to see beyond the job description. Frankly, no one even reads them. Like that's the unfortunate part, is people aren't even reading properly. Um, so yeah, we use, so for example, we did an interview with the CEO of a pretty big real estate company.
Hmm.
But instead of sitting down and doing an interview like everybody else, we knew he played college basketball. So we brought a basketball hoop to his office, and we started playing game of horse, where we were shooting the basketball with him, and we just had an awesome conversation. But like both of us were in our element, shooting the ball, having a conversation, and that helped Gen Z like see the human in their potential boss, right? And answer the question, and get the insights from his answers about like who he was and why he started the company and things like that. Um, so our job is really to bring the human out of corporate America. That's really our job.
Hmm.
It's up to Gen Z to then judge the human. So that's what we've done through content when we actually go into office or interview these people. We allow influencers. It does fall. Yeah, that's an awesome point. And then we allow influencers to actually. So we will pair the influencers and the hiring managers together. We'll put them in a room. So like
Hmm.
L'Oreal's talent acquisition team and the influencers will meet, and they'll get to know each other and understand like, why should I promote L'Oreal? Why are they an incredible place of work? What should I tell my candidates and audience besides just this job description? Um, so when you make that pairing happen and then you hear it from an influencer, again, they're humanizing and bringing into the language we understand content what this company is all about.
Right.
That's in essence, without the negative connotation, marketing, right? But again, after you get marketed a product, it's your job, as everyone will do, to review it and to see if it's legit and see if that's where you fit and things like that. And so we let that happen, of course. And some people will be like, "Wow, I really thought this was for me." Did more research. It's not. That's cool. But again, our job is to make sure that we bring the authenticity and humanness out. We make you aware of something that exists that you didn't even know exists, and then we'll let you go be a Gen Zer and do your internet rabbit holes to figure out if that's really a match for you.
So you and I met in New York in early December.
Yeah.
Great conversation. And the following morning at 7:40 in the morning, uh, I woke up with a jolt to the sound of blaring sirens. And without mentioning the name, we all know what happened. CEO of a major healthcare company got
Yeah.
mowed down on the corner of West 52nd Street and 6th Avenue. Terrible.
Yeah.
And then the person who was eventually caught became a folk hero because this particular company, uh, and listen, the guy murdered a CEO, but in some Gen Z circles, that company would never be something or some place where they would go to work because the value alignment is off.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
my point is that you must hear from prospects who have a story that they don't want to tell, or perhaps it's getting out there. How does that work, Vivek? I mean, do you have a
Yeah.
moment of honesty with them
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
dude, your crisis comms people need to fess up with you about what's going on in the universe. You are not getting good press for X, Y, and Z, and it's going to make your job of hiring very difficult. I know you're not getting paid to do crisis comms mitigation, but I would imagine your insight and in working with your influencers does sort of kind of get you to that point. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. So there is. I'm not going to say who. We might be able to infer. Banks, a particular one,
Mhm.
where they're not known for being a great workplace at all. They've had crazy stories and cases against them and things where you're like, all right, this is probably not a place of integrity or where we should tell people to work. Um, what's interesting though is having that value, because that we need to stick by that value. I can't promote some BS and be like, hey, come work here and it sucks, right? We need to have integrity. What's interesting though is oftentimes those people from a startup, purely business perspective, will want to pay the most money to actually flip the narrative, right, to Gen Z.
Yeah.
So as a startup founder, it's an interesting thing where it's like, huh,
Hmm.
I definitely should not trust you and I need to live with integrity, but you're also offering me the most money I've ever seen because you want to do everything in your power to change the narrative, right? Um, so in situations like that, and we haven't taken we've been approached a couple times in this situation. We haven't taken them yet, but what we're thinking about is putting actually in place systems of like proof of like, okay, like there was another organization, sports organization. They were like, DEI is really important to us, blah blah
Hmm.
blah. We looked at their metrics. I'm like, this is all performative. You don't actually care, right? So we need to see proof of like actual change, reallocation of dollars and effort, and what's happening, and then we'll come partner with you. But we've been approached by a couple, like I'm not gonna say the names, but they are major. I mean, everyone knows who these people are,
Hmm.
that are willing to try to spend as much money as they can to like, switch the narrative. The other one is a lot of layoffs have been occurring in certain sectors and industries.
Yeah.
They're coming to us because they're like, yo, everyone's talking about us from like, we just laid off a bunch of people, like, but we promise we're a great place to work. So working with that too. So it's really interesting because from like a value perspective, I never want to lie or lose my integrity. But from a startup perspective, it's like, you're offering me the most dollars, right? So it's like, how do I find the balance of being able to kind of optimize both ends, if that makes sense? Yeah.
Well, yeah. And whoever's working with you, you have to bring them people who potentially can do the job very well.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about that because last week we had Mika Cross on and we were talking about all these fired feds, most of whom, probably all of whom, never worked outside the public sector. And so that doesn't become a pool of reliable candidates for a L'Oreal or an Estee Lauder necessarily, unless there's something particular that they're looking for. Um, and it also gets into this whole notion of success. Helena says each generation has its own unique definition of success and its own criteria as to what makes an employer of choice. Thanks, Helena. Yeah, I mean, this generation is flipping the script. Gen Z is flipping the script to say, I need to see myself not giving up my values by going to work for you because I first and foremost, I need job security. I think that's a difficult place where a lot of Gen Z are right now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of those things where here's the thing though. Companies used to have all the leverage because at the end of the day, job security was so important that you would compromise some values for it potentially, right? Like I know people that are like, yeah, I don't work for the best company, but they pay me well, and like I need a job, I need financial security. How much are you going to blame that person, right?
Yeah.
But now leverage has flipped, and we haven't really talked about it because I know this is more of like a, future of work and like the recruiting perspective, but the creator economy that has introduced a whole new flip to the leverage game, where creator economy and AI, right? Like I can actually leave now and build a side hustle while I know my job sucks, and then build a side hustle that will make me six-figure income, right? Like now corporate America is being forced to have to change their ways to keep people because they actually can leave. And it might not be to another 9 to 5, like I said, because again, finding a job still in this era is tough, but you can create your own job using the creator economy and AI. And I think that's allowing people to sacrifice potentially values in the short term, but know that they have a way out if they build on it. Yeah.
Well, Etsy will ask I believe it's Etsy, will ask their prospective candidates for work in the company, do you side hustle?
Yeah.
Because they like that. That's part of their code.
Yeah.
Another brand which I won't mention, but I just spent a few $1,000s at their store this week. If they find out that you do have a side hustle, that's the no sale.
Yeah.
They want it's sort of like severance. You're in the building, they own you.
That's funny.
I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up, Vivek, and that gets to how do recruitment companies feel about you? Have you talked to anybody, let's say at a Heidrick Struggles, a big branded institutional retained recruitment company that made their money on creating a consultative engagement for their clients? Now I know there's probably not 100% overlap between the clients you have and the clients they have, but have you heard from anybody in corporate recruitment? And what are they saying, good, bad, or indifferent, about
So,
PeduL?
yeah. Recruiters in corporate America that we work with, or recruiting agencies and headhunters. Which side?
Let's say both.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you talk about the like traditional recruiting agencies, headhunters, and stuff, um, people used to think that like we were competitors with them and stuff like that, which
Mhm.
obviously traditionally I guess we are. But what's interesting is, what do all of those people? I mean, you said it yourself, executive recruiting,
Mhm.
right? Or like maybe mid-level management or something higher, because the traditional business model is taking a percentage of a placement.
Right.
Because that's the traditional business model, no one really. Handshake tried, but I have my own issues with Handshake, and so does every client I've ever talked to. But no one has tried to master entry level to like early mid level talent in bulk, because the business model just never made sense. Like, why
Won't
would
work.
I? Right? So I don't actually have many people that have been around for legacy, 20 years or whatever, that have like
Right.
worked in this space. They're all way up there. So we don't really have a problem with them. They don't have a problem with us. We're working with two different types of people. Um, HR and recruiters in corporate America. So it's funny. It took us so long to figure out who would take the risk on us first. The first thing was, I was working with a bunch of companies that were like, why in the heck would I even hire Gen Z? They're lazy and entitled. And I'm like, okay, like I can't sell you my vision and product if we can't even understand why you should hire me. Right. So like that's a whole different segment. Then there's the segment of people that are like, this sounds really interesting, but it's kind of like, to HR, what we're doing is like Airbnb or Uber. It's like a completely foreign concept that has never been talked about. That is, I mean, a stranger in my house, you're talking about a stranger, an influencer promoting my house, my job,
Mhm.
right? So it's a very interesting conversation, which is why we had to start by running pilots with a lot of these companies. Uh, but at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. Results speak louder than a value proposition on a Google Doc. So when they saw the results, they were like, "Holy cow! Like, this is the future of recruiting, right?" And so there's definitely skepticism in the beginning, of course, and we get it. But once we got traction with some of these large CPG brands, the dominoes started falling. People started understanding that this is where they need to be. And again, the results speak louder than anything. And so I think the one way that I want to like tie this all into a bow, and I know we're coming up on time, is people don't understand, like, okay, so there was the internet became a thing, right?
Right.
And they came and they started to disrupt all these different industries. So let's take brick and mortar. We got Amazon, right? The internet could solve the problem that brick and mortar was facing, which was like reach and selling different products, whatever. The creator economy is like the new internet.
Mhm.
It's a completely new infrastructure of disseminating knowledge, products, goods, whatever. We're taking the creator economy, the new internet, and disrupting not brick and mortar, but recruiting.
Right.
So we're building the infrastructure of internet meets brick and mortar, Amazon. It's like creator economy meets recruiting, PeduL. That's like the vision of where we're going towards.
Mhm.
And so again, it's hard to explain to people that like don't get the creator economy, but once they see the results, just like you saw how many things you could sell on Amazon, it clicks. Yeah.
There's so much more we could talk to you about. You're right. We've run out of time. I'm going to get to our final question, but before we do that, Vivek, I want to give you the opportunity to tell our viewers and listeners where they can find you on social media, where they can have a conversation. How would they do that?
Yeah, appreciate it. So you can, our website is just PeduL, So the name edu in the middle of everything that we do, the center of everything we do, and connects P&L, purpose and life. So education in the form of awareness of career opportunities will connect your purpose and life in what you do every day. So PeduL.com. You can connect with me, Vivek Pandit, on LinkedIn. We are PeduL on Instagram, Vivek Pandit 108 on Instagram, anywhere on social media. Again, that's where we live. Would love to connect and chat and see if there's anybody that wants to give working with us a shot.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and we're going to get to our final question, which is, what's your work fit? So, Vivek Pandit, what attribute condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful and meaningful things, and not the all consuming time suck of a day. What's your work fit?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Love the question. So, look, from a very young age, whether it was like just my parents, religion, philosophy, just the meaning of life, like it all comes down to just waking up and figuring out how to be happy, right? Like we all want a bunch of things because we just want to be happy. So my mom made the observation about me, which is I tend to monetize things that help me go from unhappy to happy, right? So not finding a job, being depressed, and going through the shit show of life of like, how do I find this job? Realizing that, you know what, that is something relatable to so many people. And being happy in life starts with being happy with what you do, finding purpose in what you do every day. And so that's what really drives me, is knowing that like I created a job to help people find jobs and making sure that I can do my best to make everybody feel like they have a sense of purpose when they wake up and do something that they love so that they can remember what it truly means to be human, which is to be happy and healthy. That's really what drives me. And so anything that I ever do, yeah, there's a money component. I do want to be rich, not going to sugarcoat it.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but I want to do the right thing, and I want to make sure that the right thing means making people feel like they are the creators of their life. They live fulfilling, purposeful lives, intentional lives, and they're happy. So that is who I am.
Vivek, this has been a lot of fun. I hope we can bring you back again because there is so much I want to ask you.
No, I appreciate it. This was amazing. I would totally come back. I'd be honored for another invitation.
And it is an absolute honor to be working alongside you at the Future of Work Alliance. Thank you so much for being on today. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.